how does everybody across the pond, which I'm mandated to say as an American sports broadcaster, anything that's over at a spot like, say, Royal Liverpool Golf Club, how are they looking at our reaction to the LIV Tour and PGA Tour's agreement to have an agreement, Brandel?
I think that's a good question.
Thank you.
I would say that it's viewed more favorably here, at least outside of the European Tour. Judging by what I've read in the newspapers over here, I subscribe to the newspapers over here, so I go on and I read The Guardian, I read The Times, and it seems to me like, essentially because the Saudis are involved in Premier League soccer, and soccer has such a following over here. I think they're quicker to accept Saudi involvement, the possible, if you want to call it that, because I don't think they're so quick to refer to it as sports washing over here. But at least on the European Tour side, I think that the views are more mixed. But those that are opposed to the merger are even more vehement about it and more vocal. So at least on the PGA Tour side, the players that are I would say in close quarters opposed to it are not near so vocal in front of the media. And I think that's one of the reasons why Rory has been somewhat frustrated. I would even guess that I don't know this to be the case, but I would guess that he feels slightly betrayed by the fact that he hasn't had a lot of support from his peers on the tour who are opposed to this merger.
How has that become evident to you? Any frustration on Rory's part? Because it certainly didn't show up in his golf game this past week. That's for sure.
No, it didn't. It shows up, I think, just in the terseness of his remarks, as it relates to LIV, saying, I would retire sooner than play there, or in his reluctance to go into the media center. He is, if he's not the most giving player to the media, superstar, I don't know who is. And, at a couple of different majors, and this week he's declined to go into the media center because, it's obvious he's going to get much the same questions that he's been getting. And he's not had a lot of support from his peers. And, with regard to what Rory said, I stand behind him 100%. He's not exactly getting that kind of support. And, I think he's in, because of his play, because of his status, I think he's in the most prominent role. Tiger's not near as prominent because he's not playing. And I think in a lot of aspects, Rory is the most important voice in the game. And it may well happen in the history of this game that he could be proven to be the most important voice in this game historically, because what's at stake here, I think, is the future of professional golf, certainly as it relates to the way it's viewed in the United States.
Well, in terms of that, I want to put a pin in that discussion for the moment, Brandel, and ask you about the locker room, because I think the most common soundbite you might hear, certainly from LIV Tour players, is this is a media creation. There's no issues amongst the players, that they are cool with each other, that they're not cool to each other, and that this is not discussed when they do cross paths, whether getting ready for a round or finishing with a round, or heaven forbid have a round with each other after a round, right? So what is going on? What does happen in a locker room, do you think, here?
Yeah, I would say nothing is further from the truth than those remarks. Nothing is more disingenuous than those remarks. This is, if it's not all the players are talking about when they're away from the game of golf, it's close enough to it. And outside of the media, you go into any locker room, anywhere, and this is what people are talking about. I got into a taxi cab 3 days ago in London on my way to getting a rental car, and the taxi cab driver asked me about LIV PGA Tour merger. This is not the creation of the media. This is just circumstances of the Saudis trying to buy sport everywhere in the world, and it's causing controversy, and it's raising a lot of existential questions.
And do the players hash it out in the locker room, crossing paths, say something to each other, or don't?
I think there's been acrimonious exchanges. Certainly, I've heard of those. There's been finger pointing, fingers in the chest. There's been raised voices, and I think some have just agreed to disagree. There's been players that have patched things up. Just pretty much everything across the board as it relates to sort of verbal confrontations. And then some players, look, they're out here to try to play golf, and there's no more head game than the game of golf. And if you're not in the right space mentally,
right,
you're not going to play your best golf. So I think strategically there are players that avoid the controversy, so they sort of stay, on the fence. They try to be Sweden in this whole controversy. And that's really, and I understand that, but that's not what this period of time calls for. This calls for leadership. It calls for clear-headedness. This calls for having the right moral compass and ethical compass. And thank goodness in that regard, Rory has been very vocal.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.